Razzle Dazzle. Oh yes, that's a good title. I know it sounds silly to like use that title, but Razzle Dazzle is the camouflage that was used for World War II World War I boats when they were kind of using sonar. And if you look at that actual type of stripe, it's very similar to the aesthetic of what I'm doing. And in some way, it does create a bit of a camouflage on the building itself. You have the solid structures, they're very angular. And then all of a sudden, there's this like crazy pattern that's completely chaotic. And you just get really deep into what that gesture is. So Razzle Dazzle, I mean, to think of camouflage as being something creative is great. You know, that we kind of think about those elements of the military as something that an artist would come up with is pretty unbelievable.
I mean, the first step in this process was reaching out to Amanda directly. I got on a Zoom call with her. She was in her studio, and we had a really nice conversation about what her upcoming projects were, what some of her past projects were. We talked about everything from process to budget to scale to calendar. We kind of really went through everything. It was important to know kind of what kind of project this could become.
Razzle Dazzle was started by first doing a site visit. I like to come to the space and look around, find out, you know, where are people going to be photographing this piece? I mean, the photograph is the thing that really lasts the longest. And so in the first site visit that I visited here in Sioux City, I walked all the way around the building, took a look at like different vantage points and really thought about where is this project going to lie so that everybody in town is going to be able to see it.
She wanted to know from me a little bit more about the Sioux City Art Center. What's the building like? How tall is it? How many buildings are there? What's the weather like? How windy is it? You know, all kinds of things that you don't normally think of, but with Amanda's projects are really, really important to talk about early in the process.
The first thing that just sparked my excitement was the rotunda. I mean, the glass rotunda here is so magical. In the past, I've actually covered 4 sky bridges. And so I knew that with this glass wall, we were going to see the most gorgeous kaleidoscopic, colorful explosion of fabric. So the next step is really kind of going into the design. So I work with a computer and I look at all the different photographs and I kind of use Illustrator to build this mock-up design. It's really important to start early for everybody because that transition from textile to the building is hard for people to understand. And during the first parts of public sewing days, it's confusing why a small table that's only 2.5 feet wide is going to translate into a big piece like this.
It was just such fun from the very beginning. Just the whole idea of wrapping a building in fabric was just amazing to me. So I really wanted to be a part of it.
The very first day, she would, don't worry about cutting threads. Everything I learned how to do with sewing that I have to do when I'm quilting, she just said, forget about that. So it was kind of like being a kid and just sewing however you wanted to. So it was very freeing.
Plus, I want the history, the stories of some of those fabrics. So, you know, when people came to me with stories that were handwritten or information about how this was really important to them, I made sure to document that, archive that, and I can point out a lot of the pieces like, this was from this person, and this is all about their family. Here we have something from the 1920s. That really brings the conceptual edge to the project as well and kind of gives the local history of Sioux City a moment to be able to be shown through fabric.
I donated fabric, lots of fabric, well, quite a bit of fabric. And actually my favorite fabric that I donated was my Elvis fabric. Those, that had been my curtains in my basement, and I no longer had them up, so I thought, why not donate it? And glad I did, because I got to sew on the Elvis fabric, And I also spotted the Elvis fabric up on top of the rotunda. And I think it looks really cool.
I have lots of things that have special meaning to me. A lot of memories in all the pieces here for me because I did donate so much fabric. I have fabric for my daughter's princess dress. I have fabric donated from a friend that passed away and I inherited her stuff. I have curtains, masks. I sewed over 5,000 masks and this was a great place for all of that extra fabric to go. And just odd things for my family and my kids.
So after we create these strips, the reason we use stripes is that when we're working in public spaces, it's just easier to work with a table. If you're asking people to make different shapes, it just gets complicated. And so it's nice, it's very site specific to that location, the people that are there, and then all those stripes unified go into making the final work. So we were working at West Middle and Mary Trelia Center, and laying like two pieces together and stitching that 50-foot long sections.
In the beginning, it was easy to sew because, of course, we were just sewing strips of fabric, and so it was just one long thread. And later, it became more difficult because we would circle the machines. Because if I was sewing on some fabric, I was pulling on somebody's fabric next to me, and so it was getting bigger, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I remember Amanda showing me something on her phone. I assume it was an app, but she showed me how it was almost like an engineering project where it was all laid out on her phone and she could switch it or move it, and it just blew me away. But I don't think I really understood her vision until we were at the Tyson Event Center and a huge portion was laid out over an entire floor, and you could see that it wasn't just random scraps of fabric sewn together. There was a purpose to this, and amazing to me.
And so slowly but surely we start using the pattern that I've designed from the proposal picture to actually make the final work. We went to the Tyson Center and laid out the whole piece. And what was great about that was that people actually got to see the scale of it. You know, we went from tabletop to now hockey ring size arena. And that's when it really became real, that we were going to be draping the building.
It's a big project. All of it is challenging because it forced us to work in ways that we're not used to. Most of our exhibitions occur in our galleries, so we know the space, we know the lighting, we know the conditions that we're going to be working in. This was totally different.
With the installation, it's like this whole intense experience because I'm not used to the building, they don't know how to put up the piece, and then the installers are trying to figure out what's going on too. So we're all coming together to collaborate to figure out how to put up this piece for the first time.
So many people put so much time into this project. And when those folks came to see that first piece of fabric come down on our south wall, it just was a huge moment. It all of a sudden became very, very real. I mean, we still had to tie it down, we still had to cinch it down, but it was pretty special to see that because the color was so bright, the wind was blowing a little bit, we had a lot of people working on it, and it kind of gave us energy to see the rest of the project. You know, what they say the first part is always the hardest, and that was true for this project as well.
At the very beginning, it's really wonderful to imagine the way it's going to look, but there is nothing that can compare to actually seeing the piece completed, and it is spectacular.
I was determined. I didn't know how long I was going to have to sit there, but I was determined to see it come over the top of that building. I don't know why I was, but when it did, I was just awe-stricken. I couldn't believe it.
When it's up, it's like an insane amount of emotion because all that work from the whole year goes into making it, and it's overwhelming. It's awesome.
I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. And I was so excited to find my Elvis material. That was the best part.
I sew a little bit. I didn't have a lot of fabric, but the fabric I did have, I now see it in the work. And one piece in particular, I recall, what belonged to my mother. And she used it for a tablecloth for my youngest brother's wedding.
The design really comes about kind of thinking about how do you get a person who's just walking past to really look at the building in a different way? Like how do they see that building as changing, transforming into something that doesn't look like the building anymore? And so what I really wanted to do with this specific design was to create a little bit of color chaos. At the same time, create these lines that unify every building where we put the fabric. So the Gilchrist building is completely separate, has that alleyway in between. So aesthetically, I wanted to make sure that the rotunda, the south wall, the Gilchrist, and the other side of the Gilchrist all uniformly connected.
A lot of people will describe Amanda's work as site-specific, and it is. All of her work is about the buildings on which they appear. They are measured to cover specific parts of it. They cannot be translated from this building to another building, for example. I think her work is what I would call site-responsive. And the difference between site-specific and site-responsive, to me, is that the work is in more of a conversation with the building, whether it's the scale, it's the dimensions, it's the structure of it. Amanda is conversant, and the way that it looks is ultimately in conversation with the building. So when you look at the outside of the Sioux City Arts Center with Razzle Dazzle installed, you can see how the sewing, the diagonals, the chevron, the Razzle Dazzle shapes that she's made are very different than those strict modernist grids, right angles, the way that the grid structures of the windows and the bricks are organized. Then if you look at the Gilchrist Learning Center, all of those same things are true, except that they just pop off of that very minimal, very spare, very white wall structure that characterizes the white box of the Gilchrist Learning Center. It's a very subtle change, but I think that idea of responsive is something that I find particularly interesting about Amanda's. I think that's what makes it a little bit different than just calling it site-specific.
They're made for this city, this community, this fabric, this town, this building. This administration, helping put this all together. I mean, I have to say a huge thanks to the people at the Sioux City Art Center, because they took that push to try to get to know people, and that's the reason it's so successful. I mean, I definitely am a person who loves to have lunch with people and go out and connect, support other artists that are here, but it does take the institution as well to really make this such an emboldened, awesome community-based project. So I do think it's our collaboration that made this so awesome.
We're so blessed to have worked with Amanda. This is ultimately the work of Christopher Atkins, our curator, who was the one who brought Amanda to our attention and has spearheaded this whole massive project. I know he's delighted and relieved, maybe. It's just been a positive whirlwind of activity. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, everybody here, for helping support us.
I think this is a beautiful project, just when you just look at it. Being a part of it from the beginning to the end is something I'm really proud of. I don't know if I'll do anything quite like this here in Sioux City, but I've been really happy to hear people's joy, really happy to see people's wonder. I see a lot of open looks, like whoa, when they come and see it. So capturing that sense of wonder with the arts is sometimes really hard to do. And I think this is a project that gets people to realize just how spectacular the arts can be. And when you give over so much of that process to others and you ask them to contribute, you just make it that much bigger. You just make it that much more exciting for people to see. And the thing that I always go back to is that you hear so many people say, I did that, or I contributed that, or I sewed that. And you don't hear that very often with the arts. You're coming to see one artist's project or one artist's installation, but Amanda's radical accessibility means that everybody contributes to it in a way. And I'm really proud of that.
What's really important to me is this is a piece of art. A lot of times people will say, oh, it's the quilt. I'm like, it's not a quilt. It's really important that this is a piece of contemporary art. And just like with contemporary art, you archive it. And because it's temporary, we have the ability to do that. And so after the project comes down, it's removed from the building, folded up, and we archive it, and it's sent back to my studio. So every building I've ever done, I have kept and archived. There's no way I could cut this up and turn it into something else. That's the first thing people ask me, because textile is something that has function. And so people want it to be functional. My joke is that, you know, if you want a Mona Lisa bag, just go to the Mona Lisa and cut that up and turn it into a bag. It was painted on canvas. But this is the same kind of thing. We're going to keep it. It's going to be archived. It's going to be supported. It will always be Razzle Dazzle. It will always be connected to Sioux City. And I'm excited to show it again in the future.